Hello, hello. How are we? What's cooking? Good day today. I didn't code, but I spent the first 4 hours of the day basically researching gamification and games and how games are built and what are the things to consider and all kinds of ways to kind of like just building documents around me in order to kind of go and read and feel and see that I actually have been putting in some work. Weirdly, so one thing I wrote today, which kind of like got me super excited, and I want to read this for you guys. My bad. It's this. My God, what's going on? Uh, Come on, man. It shouldn't be so hard. My bad. So I took the paper from one and put it somewhere else. Now I feel like, never mind. All right, maybe I'll read it on the second video. But the gist of it is I start basically asking myself why I'm not programming or why I'm not motivated to program. And what happens was I kind of like start discussing and I go off topic instantly. But this like space going off topic actually got me to kind of visualize some things that are just beautiful. Here it is. It's in a different book. Aha. All right. So it starts with how can I extract the way people level up in the form of questioning? Because the idea that I got while I was like doing this, I was like, but how would I conduct research in order to basically create the platform necessary for people to kind of use to level up? And the first thing that came was interviewing masters, right? But that's practically every podcast, because every podcast kind of asks people how they did what they did and all that kind of stuff. And then something about it felt a bit different with me. And the reason for that is because my questions are designed for them to kind of like open up the process of where they kind of, because if I'm talking to a master guitarist, I'm going to be asking him questions about how he became a master on the guitar. And it's not about practice. It's when did you notice this has become natural to you? When did you notice that the fretboard is unlocked? When did you notice? And kind of like something similar to how did you kind of like, when did you realize you reached different levels in playing the guitar? And how do you basically translate that into the whole game where people get to enjoy the guitar, explore the guitar, and like play the guitar? There are a couple of good videos online about people that are like very fluent with the guitar, but they're not really like the masters that we expect that have their fingers all over the place, but they understand the guitar beautifully. And they can do all kinds of stuff. It's just not really the techniques that people like when they learn in guitar, they kind of like dive into. And so I'm using guitar as an example naturally. And then I question myself instantly and I go like, has my style of talking to people become mature in its thinking? And the reason I ask that is because like, will me interviewing somebody who's a master, many people who are masters, because ultimately the platform needs to, if I'm gamifying society, then I actually need like the game of art. There's the game of art, and there's the game of painting, and then there's the game of like different colors in painting, and then there's the game of hospitality, and the game of hospitality, the game of a waiter, the game of a server, the game of like a coffee maker, barista, the game of a bartender, right? The game of a manager. And there's the whole game that everyone plays on different tiers and just like segmented in one society. Every society has its own culture, so it's expressed differently. And every other like segment of society economically is based on people kind of like being interested in things and just kind of pursuing it and figuring it out. So I'm creating a game out of them figuring it out so that they don't really, we waste like 80% of our time with stuff that don't really matter, but because we figure them out or we figure those out, then we kind of like are able to like do the things that matter. So it's kind of like a mess. You need that experience, but not fully. Like when you're learning math, you don't literally build everything from scratch. And the goal is not to build everything from scratch, but to build on top of the shoulders of giants that have already preceded you. Again, gamifying society means figuring out your resources, teams, inspiration, networks, people, that kind of stuff. Fun. So the current website is structured in a very generic way because we want it this way. And I wanted to design a generic website, but it's not motivating for me to build a generic website. But your issue is the brand design, yes? And I answer yes. Literally, I asked the question. But your issue is brand design. Here's the question. Sorry. Here's the question, and here's where it ends, and here's where I answer it down here. Yes. And so I actually ask questions and I answer. And then I respond with, but shouldn't you finish the functionality first? And I go like, agreed. I didn't want to say yes, I wanted to agree. And the functionality allows me to explore the user journey through the journey of the data. So this is me kind of like reassessing it in my head. Why am I doing what I'm doing? But I'm exploring it from a different angle in order for me to kind of like eliminate all kinds of like all to-dos other than the to-dos that could directly contribute to moving forward with this project. And then the issue seems to roll back to where I start new things daily and I start thinking about it. And then I realize, how do I actually, when do I feel like I'm not actually spending the time? It's practically when I'm starting new things daily and having to continue them. And then in my board time, instead of jumping on the things that I already am doing, I kind of jump into new stuff. So it's kind of like one of those flashy, like, look at me kind of thing. So the easiest things I finish are the ones I do, and when I do, I add new things instead of emptying them all. Basically, there's a beautiful book called like Getting Things Done. You really have to like finish the stuff that you are doing in your head in order for you to kind of like start moving, start thinking of new stuff to do. And Prahansa Yogananda, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm not butchering his name, he basically says that like find one thing and focus all your energy on it and watch it actually manifest into this world. And when you're thinking of one thing, it's very hard for you to think of something else. I also wrote that I think somewhere, maybe in like for the video patterns into the future. But ideally, if you have more than one thing, you don't really think about any of them. You kind of like, because you need your full energy to kind of bring one thing out. And like, I don't know if I've been forcing my full energy or if I've just been like putting a whole lot on top of it and expecting it to come out in one direction when I'm giving it all these directions, right? So like, again, I'm reflecting on myself. And how here I go, I see more into the gaming and leveling up parts, and then I create a full stop, and then I go, is it because it's still not fitting on the detailed parts? So here, this one actually requires explanation. When you're trying to do something towards something else, there are two approaches. First approach, and I think both of them are necessary, you just don't really know the ratio. But one is that's the image of what you want to do, the vision, and what you're doing is kind of like reverse engineering it and dissecting its parts. But on the same side, as it gets closer to you, because it's from here, it's getting closer to you, what you're doing is you're getting closer to it from this side. So I drew a chart, and the chart was simple, like the vision, and then like a couple of different branches under it, and a couple of different, and a couple of different, and eventually there's like the whole details in the center. And so my goal to get to the vision is to dive into all these details, explore what they are, and then when I figure them out, combine them together to create the vision. Correct? So I did a chart at the bottom. And when I started doing that, I kind of like, the vision gets clearer the more details added to it, right? But to find these details is like the important part. That's what people call work. So what I did was I basically kind of like, at one point I drew the vision coming back with all its details, which is the tree, just lines. It's a binary tree / any kind of tree, if anyone knows coding. But ultimately what I did was this. I took, never mind. If you take a circle and you connect it to 2 circles or 3 circles and then dive deeper, that's basically the chart of you finding more details under certain things. But it happens the other way around from me, because there's me and there are the 2 things I can do. And then from these 2 things, I have to figure out what the 4 things, 5 things, 6 things each one has in order for me to get it done. And then that's me diving into detail to understand how to do things until I get to a point where I understand the details that kind of accumulate to build the one vision, or one to rule them all. But I wrote some funny stuff, some stuff that are interesting from my perspective. And I started with Tariq, and I drew a line. And then as I was drawing the lines, I was like, what am I drawing them to? And then I realized, okay, so there's public speaking, there's writing, there's YouTube, there's gaming, there's marketing, there's front end, there's back end, there's sociology, there's psychology, there's history, there's literature, there's HTTP protocols, there's databases. And this is me basically like, and there's a bigger list that I could actually keep writing. Well, those are basically the things that I had to explore, right? It's a startup. You kind of have to have an idea of almost everything in order for you to kind of like be able to guide the startup in a certain direction. And I took a step back and I realized all of these are kind of under certain, like my experience. Like when it comes to spirituality, I've been reading a lot of the spiritual sciences, and I've been reading a lot about people. When it comes to hospitality, I was a bartender, and I opened a restaurant. I opened a restaurant and a coffee shop in Liberia, and I did catering for a while. And I worked as a bartender here in Lebanon, and I managed places. And there's behavioral science, and basically how I interact with people, and basically hospitality has a lot to do with it. But I also read books. There's computer science with the programming and everything, and then there's the business sciences, and then there's the social sciences. And so I realized that I have been kind of exploring all these things. And it's fun to kind of write them down. The goal behind writing them down is simply to kind of like realize that what you're doing is not really a waste of time, but ultimately it kind of needs a bit more direction, or it kind of needs to be tuned. Yesterday I said it becomes easier to write down the plan of the day before. So like I started considering how I would do that, and that basically is what led to my kind of like rabbit hole throughout the day. And I'm getting closer to just feeling comfortable with this, and I think that's the most important thing, because what I'm doing is I'm kind of like relaxing my subconscious assumptions. And so instead of assuming stuff, I'm kind of like going over what I did and allowing them to sink in and sink in, and eventually those become the norm. And here you go. This is a video. It has nothing to do with the notes. I just wanted to share what I did today and how it makes sense. And I'm still going to do a couple of notes today, but thank you guys for listening. It's a video. And we're building a platform, by the way. Yeah? We're building a network. I want you guys to remember that.